Well, good morning. Welcome to the Foundation of Light. Tackling loneliness together, which is very pertinent at the moment, I think, with the lockdown and with everything that's happening around the country and the prolonged lockdown, which seems to be kicking in again this weekend. So hopefully the three of us together can just bring a bit of light relief in some senses to the time at the moment, as we reflect and look forward to the start of the season this weekend, the technical start of the season, the league season, although we've had two matches already, of course, in the League Cup and the EFL Trophy with very different results. Let's start with the League Cup, the Hull City match last weekend. Disappointing defeat, but from my point of view, Rob Mason, club historian, Gary Bennett, former captain of Sunderland. Start with you, Rob. From my point of view, I thought there were a lot of things, a lot of pluses to take out of that performance. They didn't score, but they probably should have had at least 3 or 4, if not more. And certainly they should have been 2 or 3-0 to the good at half time.
Undoubtedly, Nick. Yeah. I thought in the whole game the pluses far outweighed the minuses. And yes, they didn't get in the back any goals in the back. The first half, I think I counted 5 what I thought were really, really good. And I think the time to worry is when you're not making any chances. And obviously what we saw on Tuesday night against Aston Villa under-21s is this time the shooting boots had been packed. And apart from the great save that they made from Lyndon Gooch's curling shot, just about every opportunity seemed to go in. And then you start to worry, being Sunderland supporters, then you start to worry and think, oh dear, hope we haven't used all our goals up before it gets to the big game against Bristol Rovers on Saturday. But the fact is, in the 2 games, we've made an awful lot of chances. And obviously, by and large, it was 2 completely different teams. There was, 9 changes in the Villa game to the Hull game, which demonstrated that Phil Parkinson's got a lot of strength of depth in that squad already. I know he's still, as we speak, says he's still looking to add to it with another player. But I thought the start of the season was very, very encouraging. I've got to say I wasn't at all bothered about going out of the League Cup. I won't be at all bothered about going out of the EFL Trophy, although obviously we've put ourselves in the box seat with that 8-1 win. And for me, all that matters this season is winning promotion. And it's nice to get some performances under our belt, if you like. Those games in the Cups have been extra friendlies in a way, but with a bit of a competitive edge to them. Because for me, what's the point of getting through to the 4th, 5th round of the League Cup and then losing to a half-strength Liverpool or a half-strength Manchester City side? We're not going to win that competition. Personally, I'm not remotely bothered about winning the English Football League trophy. It's a trophy that, in all honesty, I don't think a club of Sunderland stature should be in. I wouldn't want it to be diluting our efforts to actually get promotion. So for me, I've certainly got the promotion blinkers on, and all that matters to me is actually 3 points against Bristol Rovers and then concentrating on winning the league games. And I think the signs were Phil Parkinson had a similar point of view by the fact that, except for Power and Wyke, and Wyke may or may not start on Saturday, despite his 2 goals the other night. I think the fact that Phil Parkinson wanted to rest what he sees clearly as his current first-choice players was an indication that he too knows that the promotion games, the league games, are the ones that really matter for Sunderland, and they've got to matter. It's ridiculous that we're still in this division.
Yeah, but no, I mean, looking back at the weekend and last night, the Aston Villa game, 16 attempts on goal, I think, on Saturday, 4 penalties scored out the 5, and yet Sunderland come away as losers in that game, and then they make up for it with 8 against Aston Villa. I mean, echoing what Rob says, you've got to be optimistic, don't you, on the back of those 2 games, in the sense that as many as 21, 22 different players have played over 2 games. And one of the problems that Sunderland had last season was scoring goals, and maybe now they've found the answer to that.
Yeah, definitely so. I'll second what Rob has said. When you look at the squad, what Phil Parkinson has assembled, it's a very strong squad. And if he does add another player or 2, then you just think that maybe somewhere along the line he may need to, shall we say, release one or two players as well, because you're talking about Kim Bjorka. He's not been involved. We all know about, obviously, the Aidan McGeady scenario. Obviously, he still wants to he wants to play some part as well. You know, so when you add them two as well to the squad, you know, you're talking about a strong squad of at least 23, 24 players. Now, can we carry that? You know, we've got strength in depth, you know, especially with the addition of Danny Graham now. So we've virtually got 5 strikers who are competing. You know, in midfield, we've got another 5 midfield players. We've seen Lyndon Gooch play as a wing-back last night. So obviously there's competition there with Denver Hume as well. Jack Diamond on the right-hand side, McLaughlin as well, 09. So there's competitions right throughout the team. Feeney, I was impressed with Feeney last night as well. So, yeah, we've got a very, very strong squad. And, you know, I think number one target is to get out of this division. I think we need to get out of this division this season. We've got to hit the ground running. We've got to, I think, put out a statement. And I think that statement is, you know, starting on Saturday against Bristol Rovers, you know, to win that game. You know, it's not an easy start, but I think I've got a different feeling for this season. You know, I think a little bit more assured about the season. You know, if we can get up there early doors, I think that we could run away with it. You know, we'll be there for the full season.
Well, there was a bit of a statement with the 8 goals against Aston Villa. I'll come on to the starting lineup against Bristol Rovers in just a moment. But 2 positions that have sort of left me with a bit of a question mark. And perhaps we've seen in the pre-season game against, I think, Harrogate it was, and the game against Aston Villa, maybe the answer to those, that question mark I've got is the 2 fullbacks. Because at the moment, there is only really Denver Hume on the left-hand side and Luke O'Nien is playing on the right-hand side, although Conor McLaughlin and a couple of others can interchange, but it's not a natural position for them. But against Aston Villa, we saw Lyndon Gooch play as a left wing-back, and we saw Jack Diamond play as a right wing-back, a role he'd actually played as the left wing-back in pre-season as well. Would you both, Rob, I'll start with you, would you see that pair as possibly the backup for Hume and O'Nien?
Yeah, definitely. I think I didn't think Lyndon Gooch had a good game against Aston Villa, but I do like Lyndon Gooch. Lyndon Gooch is a player I've got a lot of faith in. I like the fact that he plays for the shirt. I like the fact that he always gives 100%, and he won't ever be found wanting when it comes to tracking back. You know, he's naturally a forward-thinking player, but if he's playing as a wing-back, it won't be like when we used to have Patrick Van Aanholt. Patrick would always be in the opposition box, but when the move broke down, Patrick would saunter back, trying to get the George McCartney Award for the slowest player coming back. Just thinking, I'll leave it to the defensive midfield players to actually slot in for me. I'm not there. You don't see Lyndon doing that. If Lyndon loses the ball, he will be, you know, busting a gut to get back. Equally, Jack Diamond, who we all know has really filled out physically in the last year or two. I watched him in the playoff final for Harrogate Town against Notts County. And again, he worked in that sort of wide position. If I remember rightly, he played in that position on the left in that particular game for Harrogate. And he certainly was working very, very hard to get back in position. So again, naturally, he's a winger. He put in some good crosses against Aston Villa. I think he's got something to offer. And if he can add to his repertoire, if you like, by sort of making it clear that he's not just a winger, but he's effectively a wing back as well, he could certainly give cover and even some competition to Luke O'Nien, who, let's not forget, Luke O'Nien's not traditionally a full-back either. You know, Luke O'Nien traditionally is a straightforward midfield player. If Jack Diamond does really, really well there, or anybody else, Conor McLaughlin, for instance, does well in that position, perhaps at some point Phil Parkinson might think, actually, I can utilise Luke O'Nien further forward, because as we all know, wherever he plays, including at right wing-back, Luke O'Nien.
Certainly, Bennett does show there's lots more flexibility in the squad now with what Rod was saying there about the backups that are available.
Yeah, definitely so. But I think we all know what Luke O'Nien brings to the table. I think, I would imagine, but I expect him to start on Saturday against Bristol Rovers. And again, we sort of basically went through the team. I think Max Power, obviously being the skipper, captain, I think he'll start in the middle of the park, I would imagine, alongside George Dobson.
Do you think George Dobson? Because I thought that Josh Scowen last night, and we all thought, I think, last weekend against Hull, that Josh Scowen was going to get the nod ahead of Dobson, but Dobson got the shirt. And Scowen, I thought, made a good case against Aston Villa to start the weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's something which we spoke about earlier on Total Sport as well, in regards of, the team which was sent out playing against Aston Villa is totally different scenario playing against Bristol Rovers. We're seeing, Aston Villa, they started off well the first 5 or 10 minutes, but as the game went on, we've seen the weaknesses. They're really tired near the end of the game. Every time Sunderland went forward, it looked as though they were going to score. Maybe another 10 minutes into the game, it wouldn't have been 8, it could have been 10, 11. But yes, Scowen did really well, but I think George Dobson will get the nod in the middle of the park. I also think that Will Grigg will lead the line. I think Maguire will obviously come in. O'Brien will come in. They'll be the front three. I think Denver Hume, this is my opinion, will play on the left-hand side. And the 3 central defenders will be Flanagan, Bailey Wright and Willis.
Well, they're picking themselves at the minute, aren't they? I can't see much deviation from those 3 at the back. Where I do wonder often is what his front 3 are going to be. We've got the hint it's going to be Grigg, O'Brien and Maguire from last weekend's game. But Danny Graham's here now. Charlie Wyke is certainly putting some pressure on them because he is, whatever the opposition, he is getting goals. And Lyndon Gooch will be champing at the bit to start as well. Now that's got to be refreshing in the terms of the season ahead. As Phil Parkinson's always said, strength in depth. But it does present Phil Parkinson with a bit of a dilemma. A good dilemma, but it nonetheless is a dilemma, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. Just listening to Benno's team there, I completely agree with Benno on those choices. I think that's what Phil Parkinson's side will be. I also agree that the tightest decision is probably between Scowen and Dobson. Scowen, I thought from pre-season games, would possibly get the nod, although Dobson's done okay. And I think just possibly, one of the things that's edging it for Dobson is that for years we've all complained, or most people have complained, that particularly in this division, Sunderland are physically too small. And Dobson offers a bit more of a physical presence and a bit more height in a side than Scowen will. And if it's neck and neck between them, I think that might help to edge things in Dobson's way. And he's got the shirt, in Phil Parkinson's mind, he's the man in that position. And it's his shirt to lose. But Scowen certainly, in the pre-season games, and particularly in the Aston Villa game, has certainly made a case for himself. And let's face it, since we actually signed him from QPR, he's not actually had that many games to really show what he can do. And he must be itching to show what he can do. He's played at a higher level than we are now. He's played quite a bit at a higher level than we are now. And in terms of quality, he's possibly a better option. So
just interrupting you there, is there a case here that Scowen, he is a player who actually likes to get forwards a lot more. With the way the team was set up against Hull City, Dobson sat back quite deep. He was almost a centre-half at times, which may well be why Dobson will get the nod, because it gives the team as a whole more balance.
Yeah, that may be, but I certainly see Scowen, although as you say, he gets forward a bit more. I think he's an experienced enough and disciplined enough player that if he's given a particular role in the team and say, we're encouraging Max Power to go forward more this season, your job is basically to be largely the anchor man in midfield. I certainly don't think that game's alien to him. From what I've seen of him so far, while he does do things going forward, I see the pluses of his game, the main strengths of his game, actually being somebody who is a bit of a tiger in midfield, wants to get in, wants to break up play. I think he's an intelligent player. He does know where the holes are and how to go and fill those holes. and I actually think he's a good option as your midfield anchor man. But it's Phil Parkinson's opinion that counts, not mine. And I think go for Dobson to start with. But certainly, when we see the team on Saturday, I think most people will think that the team that Benno selected is likely to be Phil Parkinson's choices. And I think all eyes will be drawn to that midfield position to see whether Scowen or Dobson has got the nod for the big kick-off in the league games.
But it's Bristol Rovers, obviously, at the weekend. I looked at their team against Ipswich in the League Cup last weekend, and it appears to be probably the same team that's going to play against Sunderland, give or take one or two players, much in the same way that we're talking about Sunderland's team against Hull will probably be the same team that plays Bristol Rovers. Jack Baldwin is in the back three. They play three at the back. And they also signed Max Eimer from Gillingham, who, if you remember in the last couple of seasons, actually was fairly influential in those games against Sunderland. So on the face of it, a very good signing for Bristol Rovers. They've lost Johnson Clark-Harris, so maybe a question mark about their attack, and they lost 3-0 to Ipswich. Do we read anything into that?
Well, Ben Garner is manager of Bristol Rovers. He's starting his first full season. Obviously, he came in, he'd been first-team coach at West Brom. Before that, he'd been first-team coach at Crystal Palace. This was his first opportunity to manage, and I think, as we'll all remember, not long after he started managing, he had some family issue that actually took him away from the job for however many weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. And then not long after he'd come back, we had the lockdown. But he's clearly been working hard and thinking hard, because I looked up what Bristol Rovers had been doing, and they'd lost, I think I counted 22 players in total had left Bristol Rovers. As you mentioned, the most notable being Johnson Clark-Harris, who Peterborough have signed as a replacement for Ivan Toney. Now, Johnson Clark-Harris, the form, scored against Sunderland a couple of years ago for Coventry, quite apart from what he's done for Bristol Rovers, is a man who was scoring regularly in a team that generally weren't scoring many goals. He was certainly their main man, and he'll be a major, major loss to them. Jack Baldwin, I didn't think Jack Baldwin got a fair crack at the whip at Sunderland. I thought he was better than people gave him credit for. Yes, he had 1 or 2 bad games. We all remember that, you know, the red and white sea parted in the 4-5 home defeat of Coventry City, for instance. But one bad game doesn't make a bad player. I liked him. I liked his attitude. There was plenty of times I thought he had good games for Sunderland, but nonetheless, the decision was taken for him to leave. And except for when he plays against Sunderland, you know, I want to see the lad do well. You know, I thought he was a good lad. I think he should get a good reception. You know, if there was a crowd there, he should get a good reception. Or future times when he comes to Sunderland, he should, you know, he would deserve a good reception. I think he gave his all for the team. And he, I would expect, will be a regular player and an important player for Bristol Rovers. Somebody else they've signed who I think will be an effective player is they've taken the central midfield player, Zane Westbrook, from Coventry City. And he's quite a decent player. And I expect him to have a key role for Bristol Rovers this coming season. But how well they do with such a massive turnover of players, you never know when you've got such a massive turnover of players as to how quickly people will gel. As you say, they were well beaten by Ipswich. But they'll come and we all know what they'll do at Sunderland, as most teams do when they come to Sunderland. They'll come, they'll look to break up play, they'll look to make it stop-start, they'll look to make it awkward, they'll look to score off set pieces, they'll look to frustrate Sunderland. And we certainly won't have an occasion where, like against the youngsters of Aston Villa, who, as Gary pointed out, didn't seem to want to head the ball. I think we'll find Bristol will want to head the ball, and they will want to kick anything that's above grass, whether it's the ball or not. And it'll make it very, very difficult for Sunderland to score goals at the weekend.
I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about Blackpool. I think they might, from my point of view, they may well be the wild card, if you like, in the pack. But Rob, I mean, when you look at the potential promotion candidates, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think the teams you've just mentioned there, together with the likes of Portsmouth, Ipswich, for instance, came down out of the Championship, you know, a year ago, started last season like a steam train, looked like they were going to run away with it, and then in fact just ran out of steam and ended up falling away. But they've got an experienced manager in Paul Lambert, somebody who's won promotion as a manager from League One before, quite apart from all of the other tremendous accolades he has on his CV, both as a player and as a manager. And I think I would expect Ipswich to come good this season. You know, that they've experienced what life is like in League One now. They've seen it from both sides. You know, the side where they had momentum and the side where they were falling away. They've got that experience under the belt. They've got a bit of quality. So I think they'll be a threat. I think Oxford, as losing playoff finalists, will be a threat. Peterborough, although they've lost Ivan Toney, they have got a good replacement in Johnson Clark-Harris. Obviously, they've lost Marcus Maddison as well. I would expect them to be up there. Portsmouth are still going to be very, very strong, although they've had a fair turnaround in players and have lost a couple of particularly influential players. I mean, Christian Burgess, the centre-half, who's, you know, the lad who started at Middlesbrough, has done very, very well in the games against Sunderland in recent years. He's moved off into Belgian football. So, like all teams, there's been a bit of a change around, but I think it'll be the usual suspects at the top. Wigan, you might have thought, I thought Wigan were very, you know, badly done to in terms of being relegated after the way they'd ended the season. But obviously they've lost their manager. They've yet to replace their manager. They've lost nearly all of the players. And in the first part of the season, at least, they're going to be scrambling around just to put a scratch 11 out, you would think. Mm. But having said all of that about the Oxford, you know, Portsmouth, Blackpool, etc., for me, the book, I don't bet on football, but I noticed that Sunderland are the bookies' favourites. We talked earlier about what a strong squad Sunderland had assembled. And I actually think everybody else will be looking to Sunderland again as being the leading contenders. The one downside to all of that is, again, I looked at the bookies' odds for top scorer and I couldn't see a Sunderland player amongst the top scorer odds. The question is, which of Charlie Wyke, Danny Graham or Will Grigg is going to actually command the centre-forwards position and keep the centre-forwards position? And the way they'll keep the centre-forwards position is by scoring regularly. We all obviously hope that Will Grigg is going to rediscover the League One goal touch that persuaded Sunderland to buy him in the first place. And if he can do that, well, having been regarded as a flop because of his performances so far, come the end of this season, we all hope he could be rejuvenated. And obviously, you'll talk to Gary, who was a member of this team, but when Sunderland got promotion from the third division before, back in 87, 88, Eric Gates, who of course wasn't the centre forward, but he was the key man up front, the mid, and scored almost as many goals as Marco Gabbiadini that season. Eric hadn't had the greatest of seasons when we were relegated, but came back the following season, once partnered with Marco, and was absolutely brilliant. And we saw a different player. We saw the Eric Gates goal. Now, I'm not putting Will Grigg in the class of Eric Gates, who was a top-class player, you know, playing in European games for Barcelona and playing for England. But nonetheless, he was a key man, and Will Grigg has that opportunity to make himself a hero this season. So the key thing for Sunderland is we have got lots of forwards now. I think a successful team, you're more likely to be successful the more options you've got up front. But one of them at least has got to get in there and start scoring regularly, because that little nagging doubt about Sunderland for me is who's the guaranteed man who's going to score a lot of goals. We don't have Johnson Clark-Harris. You know, we don't have Ivan Toney, who scored a lot of goals last year. Last weekend, you know, we saw Tom Eaves at Hull. Now, he's not done much at Hull, but he was a threat in this division before when he was there with Gillingham. And we need to have somebody who can score regularly. But looking at the team as a whole, and the squad as a whole, and trying for a second to take my red and white biased glasses off, I do honestly think that Sunderland are in pole position to win this league.
Yeah.
Well, you're nodding sagely in agreement, Gary, and I mean, echoing what Rob has said. Do you think this season, because the number of clubs Rob's just mentioned there that could be in the fight for promotion, that this season's division is arguably at the top end stronger than last?
Well, it's going to be strong, but I think, you know, just agreeing with Rob there, I've got a different feeling for this season. I feel a lot more confident. I think the players know what the division's all about. I think if you ask Phil Parkinson about the squad, I would say that this is the best squad he's been able to manage at this level, especially the group of players he's got. And I think the challenge he will throw down to them players is You know, if you need to, if you want to be in the starting 11, especially forwards, you've got to produce the goods. As simple as that. If you're not scoring goals, then unfortunately, I've got another 3 or 4 other options. And it's the same. Whoever comes in, gets the shirt, you've got to score goals. As simple as that. And I think that's right throughout the team. You know, there's no ifs and buts and whatever. It's a case of you've got to get out of this division. You've got to perform
some encouragement that Morgan Feeney scored against Aston Villa, because one of the areas that the goals have not come from is the centre-backs. Mm-hmm. And I think there's an onus upon them to start from the back, scoring goals.
Nick, you could have scored last night with a hat. No disrespect to Aston Villa. They weren't the best, are they? But no, that's the challenge to the team. And I think that's something which Bill Parkinson will be saying to the players, you know, especially when you look at the squad, what they've got. You know, you'll sit them down and said, you know, we cannot come up with any excuses. You know, I think you look at that squad and you've got to say it's mostly the strongest squad in that division. You know, we've got players in all departments, you know, competition. You looked at them through pre-season. I think they've played well. I think he's been able to work with them right throughout pre-season. We've settled with the 3 central defenders. You've got to look back to last season. We didn't know if he was coming or going. Are we playing 3 at the back? Are we playing 4 at the back? So it was all over the place. Everybody knows the job. I thought Grant Ledbetter last night, okay, it was against Aston Villa, but I thought he did excellent last night in that role. Now he's not going to be starting, but he will know himself when he gets his opportunity. He's going to grab it with both hands. Now, can he play two games a week, 3 games a week, or whatever? Most probably not. You know, it's a case of how you manage him, but he's got quality. That's what he'll bring to the table. Now, for the forwards, you look at your likes of your Danny Graham, your Charlie Wyke, your Will Griggs, your Chris Maguire, you know, O'Brien. You know, the challenge is there. You've got to score goals. There's no ifs. There's no excuses. You score, you stay in the team. As simple as that.
Last season, we saw something come along that nobody ever thought they'd see coming along, and that was COVID and the abandonment of the league. And a number of people have said to me, it is absolutely critical that Sunderland start well, because if the worst was to happen again and the points per game kicks in again, the last thing you want to do is be a victim of that. And, and there is some sense in that, isn't there, Rob?
Absolutely. Yeah, it could happen. I did read somewhere, I can't remember the details, you know, one of you may know, I did read somewhere that in the league this season, it might go down to points per games if a certain number of games had been played, though in all, I can't remember if that was the Football League or the Premier League or both. But nonetheless, that scenario could come about. Now, I think realistically, if things were called off and everybody had played about 10 games, you would expect the season to be null and void. But I think if we get the other side of Christmas, and let's say Sunderland were first or second, and they called the season off and they didn't resolve it in the same way they resolved it last season, then I think everybody would be even more angry than we were last year, in the fact that, you know, that we had a good chance last year. I'm not saying we would have gone up, but we had a good chance of finishing in the top 6 and a fair chance of even still finishing in the top 2, particularly when you look at the fixtures Sunderland still had to play compared to the games the other teams near the top had to play. We had generally a little bit of an easier run-in. If the season was curtailed this season and Sunderland were in the top 2 and weren't allowed to go up in the way that Coventry and Rotherham were last year, you know, there'd be all hell to pay. But we've, as you say, we've got to get into the top 2 positions and realise that, you know, at any point in the season, certainly post-Christmas, at any point in the season, if the season was curtailed, it could be that is it. You know, you work points per games and your final position effectively counts. And it's over a 46-game season, and it should be 46 this season. If last season had been completed, obviously it would have just been 44 as we'd lost Bury. But over a 46-game season, if it's played to its full extent, you would expect that no matter how well you do, and you'll have a little blip in the season where things aren't going well. But if you have a little blip at some point this season and you drop off the pace, you've got to realise that at any point the season could end because of COVID and, a second or third wave of COVID, and we might end up missing out again. So if ever the footballing cliche that you're only as good as your last game was true, it's going to be true this coming season.
Well, it's all fine margins, isn't it? And if we look back to the season 4 last, it was a margin of 2 wins. Would have seen Sunderland promoted last season. Well, we're talking a point maybe. Would have seen Sunderland back up into the automatic places and possibly promoted. So if we're looking at those fine margins, we're looking at, I think when Nick Allenby, the fitness conditioning coach, came to Sunderland, he said, you will look to try and get a 10% premium on the current fitness. If you get that 10%, you've maybe got that fine margin to push on and get promotion. But it is all about, starting well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all about habits. We keep talking about having good habits, and good habits is winning games. Now, you win games on a regular basis, and you find yourself you're a yard quicker. You feel a lot more confident going into games. You're going into games knowing that you're not going to get beat. You've got to get a very good team spirit, and that's what we need. And that's why I think it's very, very important that we hit the ground running. We start well. You look at, yes, it's not the easiest of starts, but if we can come out of these first half a dozen games being in the top 2, I think we'll go on and get automatic promotion, because we'll be sending out a message. We'll be stronger. We look at the squad in itself. There's competitions for places right throughout the team. And as he said, Lyndon Gooch, will he be starting on Saturday? Maybe not. Denver Hume might get the nod, but if he does get the nod, he's got to produce the goods. Denver Hume, it's no good doing it for one game and not for the next 2 or 3. He's got to do it week in, week out, and that's for every single player who puts on the shirt for Sunderland this season.
Rob, Benno said there, good start. These next 6 games are tough, there's no doubt about that. But October, November, to a certain extent December, you're looking at 7-8 games a month. That is a rigorous schedule, not to mention Christmas, albeit a home game on Boxing Day, but then 2 potentially difficult away games at Accrington and Northampton. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is where the strength and depth in the squad can prove vital. This season, with it being concertinaed somewhat with the late start and everything that's likely to happen, you look at the fixture list. Teams are going to tighten. You've mentioned there the fitness levels through the fitness coach, who has apparently made a difference since he's been there, to his credit. But the fact that last night Sunderland made 9 changes to the team, and there was still a lot of quality in that side last night. I like to have a settled team. I think successful teams are generally settled teams with few changes. But with the amount of games Sunderland have got coming up in a short space of time, as we look at the fixture list, throughout the season, the fact that if people do have knocks, they can be taken out and other people can come in and still retain some quality in the squad, that will give Sunderland an advantage over other squads in the division. Because I think if you look down the squad lists of other teams in the division, including most, if not all, of the other promotion contenders, if they were to have a run, they're going to have the same problems that Sunderland have got in terms of how many fixtures they've got in a short space of time, how much fatigue will set in. Sunderland have put themselves in a better position to be able to cope than those other sides. And in the end, regardless of the fact we've got a tough start, in the end, I never really grumble about how the fixtures work out, because in any league, everybody plays everybody else home and away. And, how the fixtures fall is just, the look of the draw. And Gary was taking a very positive view earlier when you were talking about the fact that we're playing in empty stadiums and we don't have the fact that we've got 30,000 supporters behind us. But Gary looked at that as a glass half full, because equally the other team don't have the advantage of coming to a stadium that's got a big crowd and lifting their game because they're in front of a big game. Well, by the same token this time, I would think we should look at the fact we've got some difficult fixtures up at the front. as an advantage because it gives us the opportunity to do well against those teams, get off to a good start, having already played some difficult fixtures. And equally, if we beat or even draw but come out having done well against any of those opposition teams, it puts down a marker to them that Sunderland mean business. And we're not messing about trying to chase for a place. But this season, Sunderland are going to be what Ian Holloway described a couple of years ago. Ian Holloway described Sunderland as a juggernaut in this division. And that's exactly what we've got to be. We've got to be a juggernaut. We've got to get there and just plough on and make sure that anybody else, no matter how well they're doing, are not going to get above Sunderland.
I
know, I can see you nodding away in total agreement.
I totally agree with Rob. What Rob said. We've got to put a statement down, and that's starting with Bristol Rovers. As I said, I've got a different feeling for this season. You know, you look at the squad. I think the players themselves. I think Phil Parkinson will be obviously getting the message through to these players as well. There's no ifs and buts. We've got to get up. We've got to get promotion. And I just think that if we can get to the top or in the top two early after the first half a dozen games, then that's sending a message out to the rest of the teams. And it might get to the point and saying, you know, you want to be in that position where we're not going to catch Sunderland. You know, we're the ones who's fighting for maybe the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth spot. You know, let Sunderland go on. You know, so that's where we want to be. And that's something that the players need to take on board.
I don't know if it's my computer, but where you're sitting, Benno, it looks like you've got a golden halo. And I'll take that as you being a prophet of good fortune. If we look to the end of the season, the fans quickly picked up. The fans quickly picked up on the fact that the last home game of the season is Northampton, which it was when you were promoted back in the 80s. But a little caveat to that was, of course, the last game of last season was Rotherham, which was the last game. We don't know what would have happened. But is there an omen in that? I know, Rob, you're usually dismissive of these sort of things.
Well, I'm not dismissive of them. I think it's the sort of things that fascinates me and sometimes supporters. Not all supporters, admittedly, but in reality, it bears no resemblance or no connection whatsoever to the modern team. Yes, last season we were meant to finish at Rotherham, where we finished in the season when Gary was part of the team that won the third division back in 1988. And yes, that same season, the last home game was against Northampton. Obviously, in that game, Sunderland had already been promoted, but it was the Northampton game that you know, effectively mathematically tied up the fact that we're going to win the title. So those things are interesting to look at from a point of view when the fixtures come out and think, oh yeah, this could be history repeating itself. But of course, let's face it, you know, by and large, the players who are playing these days weren't even born when those games were on. But no.
What are you trying to say, Rob?
What I'm trying to say, Gary, is it was a long, long time ago.
I think what Rob's saying is you were probably around in 1956 for the last 8 goals that Sunderland scored.
Indeed.
Not even I was around the last time Sunderland scored in.
Okay.
Well, look, chaps, thank you ever so much for your time today. Looking forward to the season. It's all for tackling loneliness together. And every Friday, the Foundation of Light will bring you Billy Wright, the son of Arthur Wright, the former player. And Billy has got a wealth of Sunderland knowledge. And I know personally he's got a lot of Sunderland memorabilia. And he'll be with you between 1 and 3 o'clock every Friday afternoon. So that's something to look forward to. Rob Mason, Gary Bennett, thank you very much indeed for your time and your sage prophet and prophet of optimism. There's a good mood amongst us, I think. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.